recessions usually mean job losses. And when a recession begins to end, we typically see jobs start to open up again. After all, that's what happened after the Great Recession in 2008. Notably, women made up a large percentage of those who entered the workforce during that economic recovery period.
After the Great Financial Crisis in 2008, because family finances were so strained, a lot of women entered the workforce to support their families when they hadn't been doing so before. And at the same time, we had a really, really strong labor market, which allowed women to enter who hadn't been doing so. Up until early 2020, women were making gains for, the prior 5 years.
Women's labor force participation had been growing over the past 60 years. In fact, things were going so well that in January 2020, 2 months before the coronavirus pandemic shut down the U.S., women had outpaced men as the majority of the workforce for the first time in a decade.
And this is a really good thing because this is the future of the workforce. We are increasingly becoming a services-oriented economy.
But all of that progress is wiped out when the pandemic forced everyone home, disproportionately affecting women around the world.
More than 12 million women lost their jobs during the pandemic, and over 4.5 million have not returned to the workforce.
The impact of COVID is so severe that it set the rate of U.S. female workforce participation back more than 30 years, to the same rate it was in April 1987. So while the 2008 recession recovery may have worked out for many women, this time, women are finding themselves burnt out from juggling unemployment or working full-time remotely with domestic roles. Many have even decided to give up their careers entirely to tend to at-home unpaid labor and their own personal health.
The burden of caregiving, with schools and daycare still not fully open in some parts of the country, is an added burden, especially on mothers.
So as businesses reopen and employers are hiring again, many women aren't necessarily coming back, in a crisis that some economists are calling the first female recession.
Out in California, 2 of the best mechanics working on Link trainer planes are women.
It used to be during recessions that women actually entered the workforce to take care of their families. We saw the same after World War II. And so this was a really unique situation in that rather than joining the workforce to support their families, they left the workforce to support their families.
According to data from McKinsey, more than double the number of mothers found themselves taking on an additional 5 hours of daily domestic work compared to their male counterparts. Much of this can be attributed to gender norms across societies, with women bearing more of the burden at home.
We know that when there's a crisis at home, whether that's a pandemic or a family crisis or a crisis with a child themselves, it's often women that are the ones to take on that care. And so when we had these school closures and daycare closures, it naturally was women that left the workforce at a faster pace.
What's different about this particular recession is that it also affected women across all pay levels, from minimum wage workers to high-level executives.
I spoke with a woman for some of my reporting who was a top executive at Facebook who left her job for childcare. When you're at such a high executive role like that, you can't just go and start working at a bar, which is really where the jobs are open. And when you have a competitive resume, it takes more time to re-enter. And so she was expecting it could take up to 6 months or more to kind of get the role that she was looking for.
Other women who chose to stay in the workforce say they were barely hanging on while balancing multiple full-time roles. Reshma Saljani is the CEO of the organization Girls Who Code. At the height of the pandemic, she found herself overwhelmed with juggling household chores, caring for her sons, and working on her nonprofit remotely.
I was doing the homeschooling while I was running my organization. In between, I was doing the laundry, doing the dishes, right? Ordering whatever I needed on Amazon. And so by the end of the day, I was just done. I got COVID and it barely registered. My liver failed. I had acne on my face as if I was like 16 years old, and it wasn't just me.
In response to the pandemic, Reshma is proposing a Marshall Plan to better support working moms, including wage equity, paid family leave, and work retraining programs for when women return from maternity leave.
So, moms are not America's social safety net. We're one of the few countries that doesn't offer a paternity allowance. That's come today in the form of a child tax credit.
Today, the expanded child tax credit is here.
But that was a revolutionary idea that's been met with a tremendous amount of resistance.
As a mother, a single mother, you need to be there for everything for your child. I was working at 311. I got a call. It was like an emergency call. And my supervisor, like, you can't use your phone. So if people need you, they have to call like the office, and you would get connected through your supervisor. My child ended up at the hospital. And I'm in the middle of the floor. I heard Dad's answering the phone. I'm instantly devastated, but I'm also embarrassed, frustrated, aggravated that I had to get this phone call like this in front of this woman standing here in the midst of everybody. I ended up losing the job because when you're out, you have to call in and tell them kind of what's going on or the reason for your being out. And at that time, I couldn't even talk without crying. That really kind of threw me off as a person.
Burnout isn't just something that happens at work. It's something that happens when you're, a domestic childcare provider. And so if you're trying to do both of those things, people's mental health suffers.
This stress has compounded during the pandemic, with one piece of research stating that working women have reported increased levels of depression by 83% compared to 36% of working men. Crucially, this can impact a woman's ability to progress in her career. And when women are underrepresented at work, companies are less incentivized to provide them the support they need.
Women do a tremendous amount of unpaid labor. Almost 86% of the household chores and the child care rearing is done by women. And so you simply can't raise your hand for that promotion. You can't start that business. You can't take on that nursing degree that you've always dreamed about because you have so much happening at home. And this is why we have enormous levels of poverty when it comes to women of color, because they're in low-paying jobs and they're not getting the support that they need, to thrive.
So I lost my job, stopped paying rent. We went to live in the shelter. One of the things that I did with a lot of my free time was volunteer at church. We wanted to show the scriptures. So if people didn't have their Bible, they could just look up on the screen. I figured out what device to use and what program to run it. I had some help, but a lot of it is me running it and doing it and implementing it. One of my friends, she saw that I had a good hold to technology.
On her friend's recommendation, Tanya soon applies and gets accepted into a coding bootcamp.
It's a program where you don't pay up front, but it's also like an unpaid thing. So there was no income coming from there. So I'm in pursuit, struggling.
Things are moving very, very quickly when it comes to the coronavirus. I'm stating the obvious to everyone here.
COVID hits. I had to shift my whole life to make sure that I supported and covered my children. I have to leave early every day from class so I could get my daughter and so that she could go into the shelter. We're told to stay indoors, stay in place, but I couldn't because I still needed to do the classes and I was having issues with the Wi-Fi they gave me. So I would go to my church.
I think the thing that broke so many of us, and it still breaks me now, is it didn't seem like anybody cared. It didn't seem like anybody was saying, gosh, the moms, what are we gonna do? Because this country doesn't function without us. But we just kind of ate it up and kept going.
Still, many women found themselves without any other options but to persevere.
I had a lot of outside stressors. There's a lot of assignments that I wasn't able to complete. I get through the program at Pursuit. I'm able to move on to the next steps with my fellow students in the class. And I'm not found job ready, but I still started applying to jobs just like everybody else. One of the alumni posted a job position. I applied. I got hired at the Not Worldwide. When I got the job, I was crying. My boss, nobody knew my situation. I didn't tell them, that's not something you tell people when you're interviewing. No, you're just gonna see confidence and competence. That's all you're gonna see.
While Tanya found success in the end, this isn't always the case for other working moms struggling to find their work-life balance. And there's still plenty to be done from both the private and public sectors to better support working women.
And then we ask ourselves, why do we have a declining birth rate? Well, the reality is it's too expensive to have kids. And so it's not that people don't want to have them, it's that they can't. A lot of companies pride themselves on offering, paid parental leave. Some of these companies offer mom 6 months, dad 3 months. Why? Or when you're a guy and you actually take the parental leave, it's frowned upon.
We've seen companies like LinkedIn and other tech companies kind of offering alternative childcare Last summer, for example, some companies offered summer camps. And then in the public sector, we've seen Biden making a big push for what we call soft infrastructure, which would be universal childcare for children's ages 3 and 4, as well as childcare subsidies for those from 0 to 5.
The current child tax credit that was passed during the pandemic offers families up to $300 in monthly payments per child. As part of her Marshall Plan for Moms proposal, Reshma is calling for these credits to be extended indefinitely, among other benefits.
Making the child tax credit permanent, getting affordable childcare, passing paid leave once for all. The second piece is really working, on the private sector and making sure that we build a work environment that works for parents, offering parental leave, offering flexibility, finally getting equal pay for equal work.
With so many things going on, we have to choose our children over our jobs. Like, we're capable, and if we're paid enough for the value that we do bring, we can actually be able to do a bit more.
Even as Congress makes moves towards financial assistance for working mothers, there are also many other issues preventing women from fully returning to work in person, from sexual discrimination to harassment to microaggression at the workplace.
And then it's the men who have face time with their bosses and are getting the promotions and are being noticed.
If employers really want to create a greater culture of belonging, it does require addressing systems, and that takes money.
COVID has given us this opportunity to look at our society and say, you know what, I want to build it back better, right? Like, this is broken, and it is okay to acknowledge it. It's not just for moms, but it's for dads. It's for millennials who don't want to have kids. It's for everybody to be like, we are actually going to redesign the workplace so that it works for us. And we have to recognize that we have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to do that.
So while financial help and flexible work accommodations can be helpful in supporting the female workforce, the solution really begins at home on a societal level.
When we still have inequality at home, we're never going to have equality in the workplace. We didn't go through hell and back to say exactly where we're at when this started. Let's use this opportunity to fix things for once. Let's finish this fight, like once and for all.